will introduce themselves shortly. So you're going to hear from Rosie Arroyo, who's the Senior Program Officer with the California Community Foundation, Maria Lemus, Founder and Executive Director at Visión y Compromiso, and Ana Ponce, Executive Director of GPSN. So each of these women have been advancing equity across intersecting areas such as immigration, inclusion, health access, and education. So our goal is to learn about their journeys to leadership, the lessons that they've learned along the way. We know there's lots of lessons to learn, and what it means to lead this work as visionary Latina leaders. So let's get started. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Rosie. If you could briefly tell us a little bit about your work and your personal why.
Yeah, well, first, thank you, Maricela, Brenda, and to the VP team for this opportunity and invitation to join the conversation with visionary leaders that I'm a big fan of and that I always look to and see as also mentors in our community. So just really privileged for this opportunity. For me, so I work as Senior Program Officer at the California Community Foundation, where I oversee the immigration portfolio. Our goal as part of this work is really to empower our immigrant communities to thrive civically, economically, and socially. And in my work, my role, I feel very privileged because I get to wear many different hats. A lot of the work I do is very collaborative. We partner with immigrant rights leaders, nonprofit organizations, public and private sector partners to advance multi-sector civic engagement initiatives that advance systems change for the benefit of all communities here in a region and state. And so in my role, I'm a grant maker. We provide grant resources to our community partners that are advancing the day-to-day work around this. But we're also conveners, and every year we have an immigration summit, and we really try to leverage our institutional resources to be able to move the policy needle forward and ensure that our communities are really benefiting from all the resources and opportunities. And so for me, my why has always been really about community. And I grew up in a large family of 10. And growing up, I feel just it was part of our civic mindset growing up. It was just you being part of family and community and giving back. So I always felt like my parents brought us from point A to point M. And I felt it was my responsibility to pick up from where they, took, left off and take it to the next level.
Great. Thank you, Rosie. I'll go ahead and ask the same question to Maria. So if you could tell us a little bit about your work and then also your personal why.
Thank you, Maricela, and thank you for the invitation. And I'm really pleased to sit here and to share a little bit of our history. Visión y Compromiso is now in its 24th year of bringing together promotoras y trabajadores comunitarios with the idea of providing leadership, training, and advocacy to lift up that person who is a promotora, who is a leader in our community. And we say promotoras because most are women. They are my mother, they're my tia, they're my grandmother. There are all these people that I grew up with. And in fact, that's my personal why, is that I grew up in an environment where in segregated America, where we could only stay in our barrio. And it was my mother who went out and brought resources to the community. And it was my grandmother who was the community healer. Never did I think that this was something that would lead me to where I am today, the history. But what we try to do is really bring forward all those important, what we call resiliency factors in our community, the history, the culture, the pride of who we are, and lift up these wonderful women called promotoras that they in fact are, right now they're called essential workers, but we've been here forever doing the work, sharing resources, developing plans, helping each other. And so Visión y Compromiso does that. We support with leadership training and advocacy. We're now a national movement in other states lifting up these wonderful women mostly. And it's a joy and a pride to be able to do this.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you for all the wonderful work that you've done and are doing, and also Rosie as well. So I want to now, Anna, ask you the same question as well. If you could just tell us a little bit about GPSN, your work, and your personal why.
Yeah. And again, thanks, Marisela, for the invitation, and thanks all of you for taking the time to hear our stories and learn a little bit more about each of us, and look forward to any questions you guys have at the end. So Ana Ponce, I'm the Executive Director of GPSN, and GPSN is an intermediary funder here in Los Angeles, and we are anchored in catalyzing excellence in LAUSD schools. And so, like CCF, we are also a convener around educational issues specifically, and we work with over 70 organizations across LAUSD that do education focused and education adjacent focused priorities and advocacy. And we're also an amplifier. So we've had the privilege to work with VPE and really elevating the issues around education here in Los Angeles. So we do a lot of communications work. We do a lot of support to our partners around communications as well. And then we are a funder. So we are a grant making organization as well. And, my why is really anchored between my mother, who is where I come from, and my son, which is the future that I'm moving towards. And I'm sort of like right in the middle. My mother moved my family here when I was 4 years old. And so the work that I do is very anchored in my personal experience as an undocumented youth in the public school system, as a student whose parents had no formal education and therefore did not have the ability to read or write or speak the language in the system where I was educated. And, all of that just really has shaped in me the urgency to do what I can to better support the system, to better educate and support kids like me and many, other kids that have parallel experiences that we have in LAUSD. And then also, being so undereducated when I got to college, and this is still happening today. I talked to freshmen and they're like, I was not prepared. I'm like, oh, really? The same story again. And, so circle back to my son and just, the fact that he has an educated mother and the fact that he has resources like that impacts his education. And like, how can we provide more of the scaffolds for the families that need them to be able to better support their kids? And kids need their family to be part of their education journey. And that has been an anchor in my educational career and leadership, is to always bring it back to the unit, the family unit. And, we also have different family structures, and we always talk about parents. We don't talk about families. And that's another issue that is also very important to me, is to recognize that every student within our system, any system, is a member of a family, and that family is an asset to that student, and we need to elevate that every day in everything we do.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ana. And I think you and I have had side conversations about that, about how a lot of when we grew up and going into school, we got good grades, but then going to college, you're like, wait a minute, I was doing really well, and why am I struggling? And then you're seeing that journey is still, reflective and still happening. So I appreciate you and all the work that you're doing with GPSN and just creating awareness about that as well. I also wanted just to talk about a word that ask each of you what word comes to mind when you think about your personal journey to leadership. In other words, a word that embodies your journey. I know that you all each have different roads that you've taken and different paths, but just want to know if there's like a word that can embody what your journey is. So I'll start with Maria with that question.
Thank you, Marisela. The word that came to mind was tenacity. I remember my mother used to say, que no te dejes. Don't let it take over. I don't even know how to translate no te dejes. Tenacity is what comes to mind. My whole life has been about running against, the norm, whether it's in elementary school or college, and trying to really be that person that I thought I should be. And in my era, being a young woman, you couldn't do a lot of things, and so running against the norm was very difficult. And when I started working with promotoras and Visión y Compromiso, oh my gosh, people looked at you like you were crazy, like, what are you talking about? Who are they? Why are they important? There was so much blatant disregard and discrimination against promotoras and myself that it took a lot of, I think, tenacity just to get to the doors, have those doors open, constantly talking to people. And then finally, here we are, where, as Dr. Ross says, we no longer have to ask who are promotoras. Still, we encounter a lot of difficulties and
Mhm.
a lot of barriers. And so I think tenacity for me is, if you believe in something, just keep at it, find those partners who also understand it and believe and will support you, and don't give up.
Mhm. Yeah, those are important words, Maria. That's very telling. And then actually just seeing, I can see how people, when they're looking at the promotora, they don't understand, but the organization has done so much in informing and educating what promotoras are and how important they are as well. So Rosie, what word would you say it embodies your journey?
You know, for me, as I was thinking about my journey, I thought of like perseverance, you know, échale ganas, be persistent. And a lot of it really just, you know, I grew up in a mixed status household. I'm one of 10, and even with my family, realizing like there's multiple generations in our family with mixed experiences. And, you know, some of my siblings, older siblings also worked in the fields for, you know, helping my parents pick strawberries in Oxnard. I remember when I was a child, and I didn't have those experiences, but seeing my older siblings and seeing the struggles and the sacrifices they made always inspired this like feeling of echarle ganas and to give back to community. And it was always about, you know, going back, like Ana and Maria have shared about, it goes back to family and community. And that, you know, I and also that it really taught me also throughout my journey that, you know, there's this quote from Michelle Obama that really resonated with me when I heard it. And it was about learn to see the value in your story and how you can turn your experiences into something greater. And it really, I love that quote because it reminded me that we have the tools within ourselves to reach our potential. You know, who better than us that knows our community, knows the challenges, the struggles, understands community. My mom also had a third grade level education. And I always think of our experiences growing up, and that it wasn't easy. And also being a Latina, being a woman, like you have many barriers and challenges that we have to navigate. I feel like it's multi-layered always, right? These different complex challenges. And so it feels like there's this constant theme and feeling of like échale ganas and having that passion that keeps you going, right? Because many times you come across challenges that, yeah, doors are going to close, things are not easy. And so, but it's just that hope that keeps that having that steady drumbeat, that you just like keep going, you know. And I feel like our communities are very strong, and it always has been part of like what has inspired me. And I feel like that my journey has never been linear. It's always been all kinds of vueltas and circles, and right. And we have to always reinvent, or okay, you know. And so for me, I do feel like having perseverance and not giving up, it's been the way to move forward, you know, porque como dicen, no hay de otra, you know, tenemos que seguir adelante.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm just reminded, Rosie, when you talked about how you have different siblings and different ages, and then their experiences are different depending on the age group. And I remember my family, my older siblings, in the summer, every summer going out and into the fields and working in the summer with my dad would go out, and they would, you know, go to different cities or different towns depending on what fruit they were going to be picking. So that was like their summer experience. And they would come back and they would say, "You're so lucky you didn't have to do that," because I was younger. So but then for me, I would be like, "But yes, but you made a little bit of money as well." So I really appreciate you sharing that. So I'll go ahead and with Ana. Ponce, what would be that word that
Yeah.
embodies your journey?
Yeah, yeah. On the generational space, my oldest sister is 80 years old. So there was also a huge gap in terms of their experience and mine.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
That was I have to say risk taker. And honestly, if I were to personalize my license plate, it would say, here we go. Because I've had to do that. Like I've been the first on so many fronts. And, it hasn't been always by choice, it's been by circumstance. And I just have to like take the plunge, and I've had to just go for it. I mean, I did it, every time that we crossed the border, I'm like, vámonos, and, here we go. We'll see what this looks like. To like when I, went to high school, being the first in my family to go to high school, because that was not the culture that my family in Mexico came from. La secundaria was an achievement in and of itself. And then going on to college, I had no idea, but I took the plunge. And then, that has sort of translated into my career in terms of taking on big challenges organizationally and civically in terms of the work that I'm passionate about. And I'm a big believer that you have to have that coraje within you to just go for it, not knowing the clear path forward and not being afraid of taking, the road less traveled because it's not clearly marked. And I, because of my lived experience, I feel the responsibility to take those risks, and also believe in the love and the safety net that my community and, my family, both by choice and not, have my back. And am willing to take those risks because of that. And, I hope that I instill that risk taking into others, and, that I fire up el coraje to do something that maybe is not going to be perfect and it's going to be hard. But if you believe in it, here we go.
No, that's true, because I think people often will say that if you hear like the word no, sometimes no just means no, not right now, but you just have to keep at it. So I really appreciate that you all are sharing that, and it's telling of your leadership skills, and then also your drive to make a difference as well. This is a question that I wanted. I wanted to hear what your take would be on this. Is what do you wish you could tell your younger self as you were starting off in your career? So Rosie, wanted to see like what would you tell your younger self as you were starting off in your career? Like, what are some of the lessons that you've learned along the way?
Yeah, I feel, gosh, there's so many. And I feel like I'm still learning and I'm still growing and challenging myself, and, you come across challenges, but I feel like if there is a lesson, and someone also in the chat mentioned this, it's that it takes a village, and you have to lean into your village. And we can't, that many times I feel growing up, it was about, like we'll figure it out, or like, and you think you're gonna have to do it on your own because you're taught like you have to be resilient, you have to be strong, and it's hard sometimes to be vulnerable. But when you're facing so many pressures, and like I remember seeing my older sisters as I was growing up, like they started working when they were 13 years old, because everybody had to contribute and help at home. And so I feel that it's like this whole thing about being strong is very, just a theme that, right? It's like, because you have no choice, you have to keep going. And so we forget that we have a village sometimes, and that it really does take a village to be able to move forward. Like we can't, yeah, you can do many things on your own, but just imagine if you lean into that village, your family, your community, whoever, that person is, your teacher, a mentor, be broad, be bold. And for me, I feel like, and I also grew up in a home where my parents were very strict. I mean, you couldn't really, you don't move out till you get married. I mean, that's the home I grew up in. And so there were times that it was everything at home in our little like village. And so it wasn't until I started like really, like I had no idea about philanthropy or certain fields, and not until I started venturing and going out and really getting more involved with community that I started to learn. And so I feel that personally, I have really benefited from being part of like leaning into my village, from like my parents, in so many ways, my siblings, the larger community organizations that I've been also part of, like Hope, and with Dr. Yasmin Davids, the Multicultural Women's Leadership Institute. And I always remember this quote from Dr. Betty Uribe that she's like, "Let fear catapult you forward." And and because like it's how can you be bold, and just like everyone's saying, like just go for it. And having that village gives you a safety net also, that it's okay. So you know what, we're also learning this together and figuring things out. And so for me, it has been about that it takes a village. And that later, even as I started to deepen my own engagement professionally, like I started to discover what a network was. And I didn't know how to network. I remember going to an event early on in my career, and I was like the calladita, the one like on the side, felt so uncomfortable. And then I remember somebody coming to me, this other Latina, and she told me, she's like, "Rosie, I don't want to see you in the corner. I don't want to see you all calladita. Let's say you need to get out there and you talk to people." And I felt so uncomfortable. But I started to just do it. And so again, it was like that village that just, you have a lot of tools that you can leverage and use. But if we don't use them, then then you don't know what potential and power they have. So for me, it's that village. It's just that it takes all of us, working together.
Great, thank you for sharing, Rosie. I want to ask the same to Maria. What is a lesson that you've learned along the way, and something
Well,
that you wish you could tell your younger self?
I wish I could tell my younger self a lot of things, but I think things that come to mind. I mean, I come from a very traditional family, and we also worked in the fields. And I remember we had to work the summer in Chabacán or Uva to lay away our clothes, and so that we could have them by school. That was kind of the way it worked. And very traditional. And I was married at 18 or 19, and very traditional, from family to husband, and working. But if I would tell myself something, it would be, and I was very audacious as a young person in my 20s and my 30s. But what saved me from all that audaciousness and not getting into a whole bunch of trouble was friends, and not necessarily family. Family is the center of values, and my mother, who is now gone, and my tias. But that's a different center than the work center, because my mother really never understood where I was going. She had a third grade education also, and they never really understood who I was professionally. And it wasn't until just even 6 months ago that my family really knew what I did or understood what I did. And that's okay, because that's a different world. And it's interesting, there's a lady here called Malena. My family name is Malena. My name is Maria Magdalena. So the family is different and they're the center, but there are friends who have taken me aside and in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s and said, this audaciousness has to be tempered in some way. You can't just go crazy. You can't just get in people's faces all the time. And so I think those friendships, and much of what Rosie was talking about, it's those who will take you aside and give you those abrazos and say, you have this potential, you have this voice, you have this fierceness about you, but you have to temper it in some places. And that was a big learning experience for me. And the second phase is those who take you aside and say, yes, you are right. Yes, you have, you're going down this path. I remember when Vision started, there was this one woman, Lucha, in Mexico. We used to go train with her. And Lucha would always tell me, Maria, you're right in what you're doing. You are doing the right thing. You are, it was such a struggle to start Visión y Compromiso. It's a book. And she would just say to me, constantly encouraging me, along with Rosa Marta, who some of you know, just constantly taking you and saying, it's okay, it's a struggle, but you'll get through it. And these are some of the things, and we're here for you. And those are the people, and mostly women, who really nurture that confidence, who really support you when things are difficult. I must say my husband also, not the same husband from early, but my 39 marriage husband, really has been supportive. And I think you have to have those are the key of my village, is those women who've supported me all along, who have said, you know, you are doing what you're supposed to be doing. It's okay, and have opened doors for me, or have taken me aside and counseled me and said, you know, maybe you could do this a different way. I don't think we do it on our own. I think we have to have somebody who, or somebodies, or a whole bunch of people who help kind of right size us as we're moving along. And they're stages. You know, who I was in my 20s is very different from who I am today, and who I was even 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And I think we have different people who come into our lives for different reasons. I honor all of them. I mean, some I could not have gotten through difficult times. I will say one thing that I have learned is not to burn bridges. That's the one thing. People say, go make, Rosie says, go make relationships. I say, don't burn bridges, because those will come back to bite you in the end. And I think that as much as, for those of us who are audacious and want to say it and do it, and maybe less tactful, be tactful and don't burn bridges, because in the end, they'll come back and bite you.
That is so true, Maria. That's very, very true. And it's important as women too. I think that just having that network to rely on, and then you also have those friends who are going to be honest with you, and that are part of your network, but then are also like your confidence, that they'll tell you how it is, and like someone else may not be able to approach you in that matter.
You know, I do
Yeah,
that is really important. You need that person in your life. You need somebody who can tell you the truth. And I've always said that you can tell me anything. It's just the way that you say it to me. Oftentimes it is only those special people who will tell you that truth, and you need that person in your life.
Yeah, then they're not going to sugarcoat it. They're going to be honest. And they're not going to tell you what you want to hear, you know, because sometimes you just like, okay, just lay it out, tell me. So Anna, it's on to you. What are some of the lessons that you learned, and what would you tell your younger self?
Yeah, well, definitely agree with a lot that's already been shared by Rosie and Maria. The networking, and I would say what I would add to the networking is authenticity. Learn how to authentically network and cultivate relationships. They don't have to be friends, but like get to know people in authentic ways. And connected to that, I think, you know, being the first in so many ways, I didn't own and know my story. And it took me, you know, into my 30s to really own my story and know the power of my story. And so, you know, the earlier we can do that as women leaders, where we're still fighting for a seat at the table, like own it, know it, and share it constantly. I would agree with the don't burn bridges, because you never know when you're young, you know. Don't be that audacious person when you leave a job. Be graceful as much as you can. Always remember grace. And then a couple of things that I would tell my younger self, and just to like share things that I try to do now, is look for mentors. Like, people are going to be willing to meet with you. And, you know, these are not your critical friends. These are people that you can expand your network with, that could give you advice on career changes, that, you know, will open the door into a different area, a field, or something. And like, people do it to me all the time. And now I'm like, oh, you know, why don't you talk to so-and-so, and making those connections, and, you know, not being afraid to make that cold call, because most of the time people will say yes, and they will give you that phone call or that coffee meeting. So, you know, for younger people, I always say, reach out. All they can say is no, and that's okay. And then the other piece that I would tell my younger self is like, take the time to learn about finances. Like, I have so many regrets, like later, you know, like, oh man, I should have been doing that in my 20s, or like, what is my vision in terms of wealth, and not be afraid to have those conversations. I feel like in Latino culture, sometimes talking about money is a little taboo, but let's like demystify it and really engage in like, where do you want to be? Talk about retirement, talk about your future. And I feel like I didn't have that in my space, in my community, in my village until later in my career. So those are my little gems there.
No, they're amazing gems. They're diamonds. Thank you for sharing. Now I want to just talk about each of your like individual work that you're doing. So for Rosie, in addition to being a leader in philanthropy, we know you have a rich history with Hispanas Organized for Political Equality, HOPE. Can you tell us a little bit more why it matters to you to create pathways to leadership for Latinas to serve on boards and also to run for office?
Yeah, no, thank you. For me, I mean, just talking about like our journey, how I first got involved with Hope, and I feel before I answer the question, I have to share, I learned about Hope by networking as I was starting to be out more in the community, and somebody pulled me aside and said, hey, there's this great leadership institute that Hope provides. You should apply and sign up. And that was in 2007. And when I discovered what Hope does and its conferences, Latina History Day, I just immediately felt like I was with Familia, and I stayed involved with the organization since then. And so what I've seen through Hope on many levels is that, and just based on the conversation today, it really matters because we all know that Latinas are a demographic like force in California, in our nation, and that Latinas really, when you invest in Latinas, you're not just investing in one individual, you're investing in their family and their larger community, because just even as we've all been talking, I mean, we all talk and relate our work and what we're doing to empower our families, to empower our communities. And it really is about having greater impact and greater scale. But just to share a little bit and more specifically, Hope, when I was on the board, we commissioned a study with USC Equity Research Institute that was looking at the impact of Latina leadership in California. And they surveyed approximately about 700 Hope Leadership Institute alumni as part of this case study. And some of the main findings from that study were that, we know that Latinas represent about, 19% of California's population. They represent about 39% of all California women. 52% of California children under the age of 18 have a Latina mother, and 68% of Latinas participate in the labor force. And in addition to that, the Hope leaders and Latinas statewide, we saw that we're making just incredible contributions to the community. 75% of them were influencing local politicians. 61% influenced local commissions. 54% influence local boards, and more than 40% advocate for racial justice issues, equal access to healthcare, and pay equity. So like really also when we talk about racial justice and equity, Latinas are not just advocating for Latinas and Latino communities, we're advocating for all communities. And so I feel that Latinas really have a very critical role and voice to play. And we know that it's not easy to Latinas to reach these levels as well, and the different barriers on so many levels. But this is why this is so critical, because it really, really does matter, and it really is about investing in the future of our communities. And so we can go on, but yes, yes, you can tell I'm very passionate about this work.
Yes, no, you are. And then also, you had shared earlier about the conference that you're working on as well, the immigration summit. So thank you for sharing. And Maria, I wanted to ask you, promotores have been like instrumental in helping families access, critical health services. What are some of the leadership attributes that make Latinas particularly skilled as community health advocates?
Well, we say that a promotora has espíritu de servicio, that they have this innate desire to help their community. We call it spirit of service. But it's not something that you can teach, and it's not something you go to college to learn. It's not something that is attributed. It's really, they're born with it. I mean, my mother, my tias, you know, I have a little bit of it. My mother had a gazillion, you know, amount of it. And so what we've done is really harnessed those women who have that and who've been volunteering and doing this for a very long time. And we honor them. First of all, we honor them as being experts in the community. We honor them for their innate skills. And then we started really providing education on different topics because they wanted more information to take to the community. So they're always learning. I mean, if I can generalize, they're always learning, they're always wanting to support. And I think the network started, as I remember back, because they were so proud. If you've ever been around promotoras, they are so proud of what they do and so proud of being that force in the community that they wanted to be able to share and to learn and to now advocate for their community. They're a force to reckon with, and some of them have, like my mom, a little education. Some are, you know, are indigenous speakers or Spanish speakers. Some are very shy, seemingly at first. The personalities vary, but they're all those leaders. Excuse me. So sorry. They're all those leaders in their families and in their community. Sometimes maybe they're not acknowledged in their families because you know, the partners of the husbands are working, the children kind of are going to school. So we're also bringing recognition to how important they are. The attributes are critical, and now they're recognized for their ability to be bridge, you know, to be bridge makers, to go out and do all these things. But they're still being taken advantage of in terms of they don't receive a salary, they don't have benefits, you know, they get gift cards. We're really breaking that down and saying for 8 hours they should get paid. This is a woman's issue and an equity issue, a job issue, where we are the way to advance that, because they're mostly affiliated with community-based organizations, is to advocate for resources and funding to go to community-based organizations so they can hire. All of our staff have received benefits and retirement now. Imagínate have been a promotora like my mother for as long as I know her, and then you retire and what, you live off of Social Security. It's ridiculous. And so, and I say to people, would you do this? Would you be out in the community for 5, 6 hours and with no money, and you do it because you believe in it, and they still do it because they believe in it? But in the end, it is about their own survival. And so our advocacy has really been to lift them up as a important to our community. We call it community transformation. That if you continue to provide training and leadership to a promotora who has this heart already, who has the espíritu, they will grow, they'll change, they will change their families, and they will change their communities. And that's what we've seen. It's without question that if you do that. Now, the role for us as an agency is really to continue to advocate the importance of their role and integrate them across systems with ANA in education, but also across, we say there's a space for promotoras from preconception to death. There's a space for us, and we are now saying, make that space for us and pay promotoras across California and across the United States for the value that they bring to community and to families.
Well said, Maria. Very, very important. And it's true, they do so much and out of the kindness of their heart, but they do also need to have a living wage as well. So Ana, I want to ask you, a recent report found that Latinas are attending college more than ever. In your time as an educator and leader, what have you observed as being critical to the educational success of Latinas?
Yeah, you know, so there is a difference between attending and completing. So I want to point that out, first of all, that yes, we have a lot more Latinas attending college, but the number of Latinas and Latinos graduating college has not moved significantly in the last 10 years. And so that's the area where we have a lot of opportunity and have a lot of work to do. Probably all of us here have a story of how we made it through college. And you know, as an educator and someone who supported kids applying to college and finding, you know, the right match, like the match really matters. I think Latinas need to find opportunities for higher education that are going to provide them a safe place. I'm sure some of you, like myself, did not have a safe place where I went to college, and I saw a lot of my Latina and Latino peers leave the school that I was at because that safe space did not exist. They could not be themselves in that environment, and therefore they could not thrive. I think another piece is the kinds of support structures that are available so that you get to completion. And then, of course, it's the money. So we need to get smarter on how we put our youth on the right path to success. And I think we have a lot of opportunity there. But we also need to do it earlier. We need to start in high school. We need to put our youth in a pathway where they're already thinking about careers and experiencing different careers through job shadowing, through internships. Give them the experiences so that they can start, sort of dreaming big, and also have an understanding of how they're going to navigate that space to get to where they're going. So let's get them in, let's get them through, and then support them on the employer pipeline. We have so many Latinas that are underemployed, and Maria, to your point, that they're working for a lot less than other folks are making, and are also not accessing the quality of professional jobs that they are capable of getting. So what are we doing at that end, as mentors, as expanding their network, and really thinking about the whole picture to get more Latinas on the path to C-level positions and in positions of influence and decision making? Because again, it's going to be one Latina, but they're going to be impacting a whole lot of other Latinas and Latina families, and just to start to change the system and the experience and opportunity for Latinas.
And that's really important, Maria, and Ana and Rosie. I think that for many of us, our journeys were different, but I think we probably didn't know that our careers existed when we were younger. And I think that it's so important for us to let our youth, and especially Latinas, know that there's so many opportunities. I know initially I was thinking I wanted to become a teacher, but I wasn't sure that I didn't even know about a superintendent. Becoming a superintendent or becoming a principal was an option. And so I when I saw my older siblings who were teachers and saw their struggles, and I thought, like, no, I don't want to be a teacher. And so, but I didn't think about, oh, you could have been a superintendent, or there's like so many different career paths that we're not aware of when we're young. So I think it's so important to let people know that there's so many different options that we may not be aware of. We're now at the time. I have many questions I want to ask, but let's open it up to our attendees. So if you could just raise your hand if you have a question for any of our guests today. So you just have to raise put the little icon that you have a question. Oh, I have a question. So while we're waiting for others to come up with to write in their questions, what are some of the ways that we as Latinas can get involved with advancing some of your missions? So Ana, what are some ways that we can do that?
Take some of my high school interns, expose them to your career.
That's true.
I'm very clear and direct. I need experiences for high school students.
Yeah, so share a little bit about that, Ana.
Yeah, sure. So right now we are collaborating with LAUSD to figure out how to expand their high school internship opportunities for their students. Currently, LAUSD students graduate with, or about 2,000 students graduate with a high school internship experience, and we want to get that in this pilot program to 3,000. So want to increase it by 50% in the hopes that the district can then improve that rate and get to 40% of high school kids graduating with a high school internship. It doesn't have to be a college pathway. It could be, you know, an area of interest for them. So we're not pushing, you know, trades or college. We are just pushing a work, what is it called? Work-based experience for high school kids. And we're doing it in partnership with Big Picture, Link Learning, and LA's Promise Fund. And again, it's focused on increasing the number of high school students accessing a high quality high school internship program over the summer.
Great. Oh, you already have someone that said that they can host a high school student. So one of the questions that I have, Anna, so the person that is hosting, do they have to pay the student, or how does that work?
Yeah, we have some we have a small fund for folks that can't afford to pay. Right now, we have about 80% of the employers that have signed up can pay, but we understand that we might have some nonprofits that can't pay. We want the kids to get paid, you know, at least the minimum wage for every hour that they work. And so we will discuss, you know, if you can do a little stipend and then we'll cover the rest or some scenario, but we just want to get kids out there. And we also want to build a culture of hosting high school internships in the city of Los Angeles.
Great, thank you. Very important, and we all remember looking forward to the summer and then having to work. So having those types of opportunities are really important as well. So Rosie, I want to ask you a question. In your, you know, throughout your career, what have been some opportunities for women and girls? Have you seen them improved, and do you see any threats to these opportunities?
Yeah, you know, I feel I feel it depends how you look at things. Like in some ways it feels like we've made gains and advances as a community, but at the same time it feels that we're facing significant challenges. And you know, as we're seeing just now, right, our communities and building out what Anna was sharing, you know, are really facing a lot of like multi-layered challenges, from having access to quality, affordable housing, to, you know, education, having the basic safety net support around healthcare, you know, services, and others, you know, like my parents, you know, we have an aging also like population. And like, for instance, my parents go to Tijuana to take care of their dental like need, like it's, and so we're seeing like, we're as a community also, you know, it's like these multiple generational, also, I think, needs that we're seeing, right? And I say that because when I think of regions like LA County and the state and the demographics, LA County is like 50% Latino. But when you look at the investments that go towards our communities, it doesn't really translate to the needs that we're seeing. And so for me, I feel like there is an opportunity. I would actually extend a call to action or an invitation to Latinas to look into also fields like philanthropy, because we need more representation. We need more Latinas in the field, because less than 1% or so, based on the last study I had seen, philanthropic dollars go towards Latino-led nonprofit organizations at a national level. And so that is a very low investment. And so I think there is an importance to have a seat at the table in very diverse sectors, because we need all sectors. No one sector can do it all. So we need representation across sectors and in different fields, so that we could really think about opportunities on how do we leverage, like just imagine, like even within this group here, if we were to map out who's where, how do we connect and map out and really say, how do we partner, right? Like and how do we collaborate and how do we coordinate, because it's really the way forward. So I just feel like there's a great opportunity to continue to invest and support our young girls and Latinas.
Yes, very important and very needed. And I think that collectively as women, we need to start making sure that we're making an impact, especially for our younger Latinas. So I appreciate that, all the work that Hope is doing with Rosie, with your involvement as well. and just I think just creating that awareness, because not too many people know about the opportunities and programs that are out there, and it's just important to let people know that there are opportunities and there are ways to either, like Anna, with your the internships that you're providing, and just making sure that there's just that awareness available. And Maria, I wanted to ask you, like, what advice would you like to have received as a young woman entering your field?
Entering my field, I didn't enter it as a young woman. I entered it as a mature woman.
But yeah, but just like, well, yeah, like what advice?
I'm thinking as a young woman
Mhm.
I left college to start a job at 21. So I didn't graduate till 10 years later after I'd had kids and divorced and did all that. I think as I think of young women today, those who get into college are very fortunate. The fortunate few who get into college. And I agree with you, Anna, the attrition rate is high and so many complexities, peer pressure, money, you name it. But when we're in the community every day with promotoras and with our families, and what I see is there isn't a vision and a hope for young Latinas starting in elementary school. You know, what is it that you can even envision if you don't have a vision for what the potential is? And I think for me, it starts that early. You know, how do we expand the ideas of somebody that it's outside your life can be outside of your neighborhood, outside of your barrio, outside of your city? We see that lack of vision and opportunity. So how do I dream if I don't know what's the potential is?
Mhm.
And I think that's a really important piece for me. We started training promotores in high school, but it probably even has to start, you know, the orientation has to start before then. I think about, we have a program, promotoras that we work with in Lake Tahoe. And I'll give this example because to me it was so striking. So there's a lot of promotores and Spanish-speaking families and Latinos that are in the service industry around Lake Tahoe. And so we were out there training and doing all this. And it was in a community center and the snow had just been falling. So you saw people cross-country skiing. And I said, well, let's, you know, hey, do your kids do that? They didn't know about cross-country. They didn't know about snowboarding. They didn't know about anything. And so how do we encourage families to step outside of the day-to-day living, getting food on the table, and the children, so that they can envision themselves being a snowboarder? It's the same thing for being a golfer, for being a musician. How do we encourage that visioning for young people so that the numbers that get to college or get outside, even get to high school, are greater? And I must say, college is not for everybody. So for instance, my mechanic makes $75 an hour. That's a job. That's a good job. So how do we expand and not put the pressure on our young people that everybody has to go to college? Not everybody should or can, but envisioning opportunities, starting their own business, you know, doing something else, being in a union, all those things are great things to do. So I think it's exposure. I think it's visioning for young people so they can see the potential outside, not to, I don't know how to say this negatively, but you know, for some young women, their future is having a baby at 15 or 16 or 17. And I think a lot that happens over generations, and it happens if that's your world, if your world is that small. And so how do we grow? How do we expand that world for our young women to see you can be a Rosie, you can be an Anna, you know, you can be all these things. And if you don't know it, you're not going to vision it. And so I think that for me, that's a really important piece.
Great. That's a wonderful way to wrap up our panel. Thank you so much, ladies. And thank you, Ana, Maria, and Rosie, for joining us today for our Lunch and Learn. Please stay connected with VPE. So there's our information, as well as on social media. We'll be providing updates, and then we'll be also sharing the recording of this as well. I just want to thank you so much again and appreciate you joining us today. And I think we all got a lot of nuggets of information that we'll be able to take home and also share with other Latinas as well, and also with our networks. Again, thank you so much. And that concludes our